Hello everyone. Welcome back to another Commander review for Magic the Gathering. Today, we are still in the Planar Chaos set, which essentially is taking a fun color identity twist to some of our favorite and iconic Magic the Gathering characters from the olden days of Magic the Gathering. And I did a very long video in comparison to what I normally do, a very long video of a Chroma Angel of Fury. I think this one will be a lot shorter, just because of how simple this card is. Braids Conjurer Adept, so no longer a mono black sacrifice everything commander. This is now a mono blue, we get to put things into play for free. So this is a legendary human wizard. It's a power and toughness of 2/2 with a mana value of 4. 2 generic and 2 blue mana. And all Braids has is this cool triggered ability. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player may put an artifact, creature, or land card from their hand onto the battlefield. So the complete opposite of the mono black Braids minion cabal. We're gonna be doing mono blue group hug essentially, and obviously the best way to take advantage of this is by putting things into play that absolutely are so much worse than anything our opponents could put into play. That is probably the best way to play this commander, is by playing a bunch of Eldrazi's and then putting them into play for free with Braids, while your opponents are probably putting down whatever big awesome threat they have as well. But when they're going up against Eldrazi's with Annihilator 6 and then protection from instants and sorceries, and they give you extra turns when you cast them or something, I don't know. Obviously you won't get any cast triggers from this. I guess that is important to note. You don't get cast triggers. These are put into play, not cast for free. So you won't get cast triggers, but still, you can cheat into play Titanic-sized threats into play with this commander. 2 card rulings for this commander came out in 2020 for these rules, so pretty recent. And that might actually be due to the fact that Braids got unbanned at this point. I don't remember if this Braids was banned ever. I know the mono black one was banned for quite some time, but I don't know about the mono blue one actually. First rule of the 2 reads, Braids effect doesn't count as playing a land if you put one onto the battlefield with it. You can still play a land for the turn during your main phase. Just like any other card that says put a land into play from your hand, doesn't count towards your land per turn. Same thing with Braids. This is a way that you can cheat lands into play as a mono blue deck, which is really cool, especially because you're mono blue. But obviously lands are not the strongest thing to cheat into play, but it is something that you can do regardless, which is awesome. And then second rule for this card is, if the permanent you put onto the battlefield has an ability that triggers at the beginning of your upkeep, it won't trigger during that upkeep. And I want to make this perfectly clear with, like, not just upkeep related stuff, but there's also attack related stuff, because there was a lot of confusion with oh gosh, I can't remember her name. Kalia the Vast. She has an attack trigger that lets you put a demon, dragon, or angel into play. This is a very similar thing. The way that steps and phases work is when you go to the upkeep step, all of the beginning of upkeep triggers have to go on the stack. That's not you, that's not your opponent, that's just how the game works. Those are the rules of the game. The first thing that happens at the beginning of your upkeep is all of your upkeep triggers go on the stack. Then your opponents, then if they have any, and then they resolve in turn order. Priority order, essentially, reverse priority order. So the reason why that rule is there is because once all of those triggers go on the stack, then it's done. And the next thing we do is now we resolve all the upkeep triggers. So we've passed the step of putting the triggers on the stack. That is why that rule is there. If you put a card into play that says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card, you won't get that this turn that you played it, simply because you've already put the upkeep triggers on the stack and you're now resolving them, which was to put this thing into play that gives you an extra card draw on your upkeep. On your next turn, yes, you'll get it, but not on the turn that you put it into play, simply because by the time it enters play, you are resolving the pre-existing upkeep triggers, and you can't put more on until your next upkeep. A little confusing, but essentially the way it works is beginning of upkeep, put the triggers on the stack. Once that's done, no more triggers can go on the stack unless it's triggering or reacting in some way to what's being resolved. You can't put any more at the beginning of the upkeep because that's already happened. And just to make things even more confusing, Paradox Haze is the card I chose to synergize with this commander because this will allow you to have these shenanigans. This is how you can get around that second rule there of it won't trigger. This is how you get around that rule. Let's say that you have Paradox Haze in play, you have Braids in play, and then you put both those triggers on the stack because they say at the beginning of your upkeep. Or in this case, enchanted player's first upkeep. Both those triggers go on the stack. What you want to do is you want to resolve Braids first. I guess it doesn't really matter because of how Paradox Haze is worded. You'll get that second upkeep phase step regardless. But essentially what will happen is they'll both resolve, and you'll put that card into play that says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. And then Paradox will have that delayed trigger resolve. Now you get a second at the beginning, a second upkeep phase, which then says at the beginning of your upkeep, do yada yada yada. Paradox Haze won't do anything because it only cares about the first upkeep each turn, so you've already had one. However, the other two cards, Braids and the one that lets you draw a card, will trigger again, and you'll use Braids to put something else into play, which is bonkers, and you'll be able to draw that extra card with the other card, and you can stack those triggers however you want. Maybe you want to draw the other card and then put that card into play. It doesn't matter, but essentially Paradox Haze is how not only you get to take advantage of your commander's ability by doubling it versus what your opponents do, which is just one, but it allows you to double all the other upkeep triggers you have. So it is a great card. There are other cards that do this effect. They're just way more expensive than this one. So this is kind of more the budget route. Now, earlier I had mentioned that lands were not the strongest thing you could do with this ability that Braids has that allows you to cheat lands into play. However, many of the mono blue decks I play have this kind of effect in it, whether it's like Walking Atlas that lets you cheat lands into play, whether it's Terrain Generator which lets you cheat lands into play, and so on and so forth. So it could be possible. It might not be the strongest unless you build like an oppressive landfall matters mono blue deck, which you could do, but you just want to make sure you're building appropriately, because while you're cheating lands into play with Braids, your opponents are going to be ramping out with like giant dinosaurs and dragons and stuff like that. So you want to make sure you build this landfall deck into like an oppressive control deck, essentially, where you're cheating lands into play to get cool landfall triggers to like steal your opponent's creatures or to bounce them back to their hand so they can't use them, stuff like that. But you get to cheat lands into play, which means you get cool landfall triggers. So a landfall deck would be an interesting challenge to build with this commander. And that's going to do it for Braids. Conjurer Adept. I've gone quite a bit on not just Achroma, but on this video too. There's a lot to talk about with these commanders. Lots of cool deck ideas that you can find online with these commanders, so let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Like I said, there's a lot of deck ideas, so that's why this commander has the rank of S. All of the commanders in this set are going to have the rank of S, and I might have to refigure how I do my tier lists, because based on deck ideas alone is kind of becoming obsolete as more and more players are brewing with all of these decks, which I love. That's great. That's a great problem to have. But it is still a problem, so I'm going to figure out how to handle that. But for this set, essentially everything is going to be S tier, which is great. So thank you again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!